Hi, I'm Sam Matler, the founder of EDM Prod and the person behind this start to finish course. I'm super excited to teach you a ton of tricks, techniques, and of course, show you how to make an uplifting trance track from start to finish. But before we get into that, I'd like to give an overview of the course. I'd like to tell you why STF, or start to finish, is an effective form of learning. Then I want to go over the characteristics of uplifting trance. What makes uplifting trance uplifting trance? After that, I want to tell you what we're going to learn in the course. What we're going to cover, the specific topics. We're making a track from start to finish, but what are we actually going to look at? And finally, I want to tell you how you can get the most out of this course. How can you learn as much as possible, extract every little piece of advice or every little bit of information? How can you learn the most? So let's get into it. I've got a presentation here. We're just going to run through it quickly, and after that, we'll get going and we'll start making the track. So we should really start with what is STF? Obviously, STF means start to finish. And what does that mean? It means I'm going to show you how to make a track from start to finish. I'm going to be making a track from start to finish and basically detailing what I'm doing the whole time. But why is this an effective form of learning? Why would you watch someone make a track from start to finish? Well, there's a good quote that I want you to read first. It says, imitation is not just the sincerest form of flattery, it's the sincerest form of learning. And this is very true. When you imitate people, when you copy people, you learn a lot. And I want to take this further and say that when you're observing someone do something who's good at doing it, that's a really good form of learning. So if you imagine, take your favorite producer. For me, that might be someone like Matt Zo or BT. And if I could spend a day in the studio with them and just watch them work, I would learn more. I think I would learn a lot more in that one day than I would learn from a month of reading books or watching tutorials. So imitating and observing are two of the best ways to learn. So as I've said, effective learning, observation, watching people, and imitation are essential. And in fact, I would put them as a second best way of learning behind the actual process of making music. So obviously practice is at the top, but below that you've got observation and imitation. And what's interesting is that if you're just making music without any form of learning outside of that, you can be practicing bad habits. You might not be doing things properly. You might be doing things inefficiently, which is why they have to go hand in hand. You can't spend all your time watching other people make music and not make any yourself, but you also can't spend all your time just stuck in this closed box and you're not learning anything else or gaining any other knowledge. So that's why STF is effective. It's basically me creating the track from start to finish, detailing the whole process. I'm not gonna do any shortcuts here. I'm gonna show you every single thing I'm doing. So it's very in depth, and that's why this course is quite long. It's many hours long. And through detailing the whole process, I also share a lot of advice, tips, and tricks. So instead of just turning a knob and saying, I'm turning this knob here, I'll tell you why I'm turning that knob, what effect it has. So for example, when we layer the bass line, which is a very hard thing to do, especially in uplifting trance, you've got these multi-layered bass lines. I'm going to explain what I'm doing each step of the way so you can understand it, you can take it in. And you won't just need to copy me when you're making your own music, but you remember, Sam did that because of that or this. And you'll be able to apply that theory or that knowledge or that idea to your own music. So it's not just copying, it's learning at the same time. I'm teaching you. And a good way to think about it is you're in the studio with me, not physically, you're not here, but virtually. You're in the studio with me. So it's a good way to think about it. You're watching me make a track and I'm explaining everything. The only thing you don't have the ability to do is ask me questions as you would if you were sitting next to me. However, you can always ask me a question via email. So we're going to move on. What we're going to make is uplifting trance. If you haven't heard of uplifting trance, I'm sure you have because you bought this package. But as a refresher, uplifting trance, the characteristics include a strong kick and bass, multi-layered bass lines. So normally, not always, some uplifting trance songs have a simple bass line, but a lot of it has these multi-layered bass lines. You've got a higher layer, a mid layer, a low layer. So we're going to learn how to make those. They often have very euphoric melodies. That's where the word uplifting comes from, because you hear the melody, you put your hands up, and wow, it feels amazing. They also often have dramatic breakdowns, not always. So you might have some strings, you might have a nice pad progression, maybe a nice piano. And often they have high energy. So very quick, about 138 beats per minute normally, can go up to 140, can be a little bit lower. And they're typically quite long, around 6 to 7 minutes. Now, obviously, there are many more characteristics to uplifting trance, and the style of uplifting trance differs from artist to artist. In this course, we're going to be making a rather generic uplifting trance track simply because it appeals to most people. We're not going to make one in a specific style, but to me, we're making one in the most... we're making just a standard uplifting trance track, nothing too edgy or unique. So you know about the characteristics of uplifting trance, but what are we going to learn? What will you learn in this course? The first thing is composition. Obviously, that's a really important part of making music. So we're going to be looking at writing the melody, the breakdown section, and making a killer arrangement. The structure is incredibly important in uplifting trance, as I'll explain. We're also going to look at sound design, not for every single sound, but a lot of them. So we're going to be making the bass line pretty much from scratch. I'm going to be showing you how to layer those basses. We're going to make the pluck and lead sound from scratch. Then we're going to look at drum programming. Now, drums in uplifting trance aren't super complex like they might be in drum and bass, for example, but there is an art to it. So we're going to cover that. We're also going to look at crafting build-ups, mixing, and some basic mastering. Now, I'm not a mastering engineer, full disclaimer. I don't think you are either. We're not going to go too deep into mastering simply because my personal philosophy on mastering is it should be left to an engineer. But we're going to do some basics, some quick mastering anyway, because I know that a lot of you want to see that. And now, obviously, I've listed 6 things here, but there is a lot more that you're going to learn. There's just little things, little tips and tricks, other topics. I might often go off on tangents just to explain a certain thing. So let's say, for example, we're layering bass lines. I might take 5 minutes just to talk about layering itself, so you can just learn that. And if you know it, then you can skip over it. But if you don't, you're going to learn something new about layering. So you know what you're going to learn, but how do you get the most out of this course? How do you extract every little bit of information and really get your money's worth? Well, the first thing I recommend you do is you pay really close attention. And that means when you're watching this, try to set aside some time to really watch it. Maybe an hour per day, or in the weekend if you've got a busy life. But get rid of distractions, really pay close attention, and feel free to pause the video if you don't understand something, or you just need a moment to process it and take it in. These videos aren't live. You have the luxury of pausing, of rewinding, of going back to a certain section. So I highly recommend you do that. The second thing I recommend you do is watch it through twice. And you don't have to do this if you pick it up the first time. But I've had a lot of people say with the last STF, which was Progressive House, they would watch it through once, just quickly, not pausing, not trying to understand. And then the second time they watched it, they would follow along with their own sounds, their own drum samples, their own synths. So that's one thing you can do as well. The third thing I recommend you do is dig into the included project file. It's an Ableton file. I assume you use Ableton. If you don't, if you're watching this with another DAW and you're just porting over the ideas, then you won't be able to look into this project file. But if you have Ableton, you will be able to, and I recommend you do. Dig into the project file a bit, see what I've done. Obviously, you're going to see me make this project file from scratch, but it's good to use as a reference, just to go back and think, how did Sam layer those bass lines? I completely forgot. And it's just quicker than going back into the video that I did that in, looking at the project file and going, oh, he did this. So I highly recommend digging into that project file. So the other thing I recommend is that you copy me using your own sounds. So why is this effective? It means that you're forcing yourself to think a little bit. Go, wow, his kick sounded like that. I'll use one similar, or maybe I'll use one a little bit different, or I didn't quite like the clap Sam used there, but I'll use this one instead. So trying to copy along, but doing things your own way as well. You can copy along exactly if you have the same samples. I don't mind. And finally, take notes. This is incredibly underrated advice. You should be taking notes when you're watching this. When you put something down in writing, you kind of solidify it in your head. You retain it better. So if I'm talking about EQ or I'm talking about composition and you hear something and you go, wow, I'm going to remember that, or I'm going to use that track in my next track, note it down on paper or in an app like Evernote or OneNote. So we're going to get into it now. If you have any questions at all, you can find me on Twitter at EDMprod or email me sam@edmprod.com and I'll get back to you within a few days. I try my best to get to emails. Sometimes I get a few and sometimes I'm pretty bad at replying to emails, but I will always get back to you within a few days. If you have any questions, get in touch. All right, let's go.